Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'll be tonight's host. With us, we have a second visit from two of our Green Party friends talking about campaign financing and the litigation, numerous parties versus the state of Connecticut, where the campaign finance laws were struck down, and that'll go ultimately to the next level. But tonight we also have with us John Hartwell. John Hartwell is with Democracy for America, and he was also a candidate last year for Connecticut's 26th state Senate seat. And again, of course, also we have for a second time Mike DeRosa, who was a candidate last year for the Connecticut's first Senate district.
Correct.
And he is also with the Connecticut Green Party. He's co-chair of the Connecticut Green Party, and also he was one of the litigants in the in the case. And also we have Richard Duffee, who's on the National Platform Committee for the Green Party, and he was a candidate for was it last year, Rich?
Yes.
Last year, candidate for Connecticut's 4th congressional district. He ran as a Green Party candidate against Jim Himes last year. Mike, take us back to our first visit and talk about the nuts and bolts of the case.
Well, the nuts and bolts of the case are that it would be August 27th, Judge Underhill, who's the federal judge in the Second Circuit Court, decided that the Connecticut campaign finance law was unconstitutional, that it violated the Green Party's First Amendment and 14th Amendment equal protection provisions of that particular amendment, and he stayed the entire law. Now, since then, they've gone back to court. Attorney General Blumenthal was there arguing the case, and he basically said that he wanted to have a stay. The judge said no, but he would allow a stay. The judge said if the state of Connecticut and the various litigants could get an accelerated appeal through the Second District Appeals Court, which is the case at this point. And on the week of January 11th, we'll be back in court in New York City with the 3-judge panel to decide whether Judge Underhill's decision will be upheld or will be rejected.
Now, that is relatively quick, though, isn't it, for a case to go to a circuit court for review?
Well, yes, but this case has been going on for 3 years. The state of Connecticut, who are the defendants of the case, and the various interveners have been dragging their feet for 3 years, trying to get this case to basically drag on forever. And the court understands that we have been hurt, that we've been damaged by this as a party, along with the Libertarian Party and the other people in the case. And so they have taken it upon themselves to expedite it.
Now, before we go on to talk about more details of the case, we'll talk about the general feeling amongst the litigants. Was it your intention to completely overturn the public finance laws? What was the motivation? Was there any motivation beyond a level playing field?
Well, our motivation was that after a lot of thought, we came to the conclusion that the state of Connecticut had decided that all political parties are equal, but some political parties are more equal than others. And we decided that that was unfair and unconstitutional. We went to court about it, and basically it has to do with the petition requirements. As I mentioned last time, we have something called the Iron Triangle, and these are the 3 aspects of the case that we're quite upset about, which is extreme petitioning. For example, in 2010, we will have to collect 226,000 valid signatures, or 400,000 raw signatures, to qualify. The number of signatures available or required from the major parties, Democrats and Republicans, are 0. And then, of course, there's $250,000 that we have to raise to run for governor, along with the other folks. And now there's a huge number. And then, of course, there's something called the organizational expenditures, whereby a candidate who's running for governor, say, for example, can tap into 366 town committees to get unlimited funding, which is spent outside of their treasury, but is spent in coordination with them. They can also tap 8 legislative committees and get unlimited funding. So quite frankly, that's unfair, and it's very, discriminatory and capricious.
You mentioned raw votes. You mentioned raw votes of about 400,000 and
400,000 petitions,
now,
not signatures.
Why the difference between, what do you mean by raw vote, and why is it 400,000 and then 225,000 or 226,000?
The way it works is we have to collect 226 valid signatures. That means that they're checked by the town clerk's registrar of voters or what have you. And in order to do that, historically, we've been petitioning since day one. And what we found out is we have to double the number of signatures that we get. So if you double 226,000 valid signatures, you get around 400,000, 375, something like that, which no party on the face of the earth will ever be able to accomplish, because what we're talking about here is not only a quantitative problem, but a qualitative problem. Because when I go to a person on the street and I say, Dave, I'd like you to sign my petition, they'll say, well, why? And I'll say, because I want to get on the ballot. And most people will say, well, everybody should be on the ballot. But when I turn to them and say, if you sign my petition, I'll get $3.2 million for governor, that's a completely different kettle of fish, as they say. So the bottom line is we would like all of these provisions changed. What we think is going on here is that the state of Connecticut said, the Maine and Arizona system are great, so we're going to have those systems on steroids for the major parties. Then we're going to create this Frankenstein monster for minor parties, independents, and other people.
Now, you mentioned that you ran for the 1st Senate District last year, as Rich ran against Jim Himes in the 4th Congressional District. John ran in the 26th Senate District. I ran in the 107th Assembly District. Now, both John and I, and we can speak to this, both John and I took part in Connecticut's public finance law and found it to be very good in the sense that we didn't have to spend a huge amount of time collecting money. We got our money, got it out of the way, qualified. In John's case, he'll tell, he has the numbers of what he had to raise and what he ended up with for financing, but in my case I raised $5,000 and got an additional $25,000 by reaching those thresholds of 150 individual donors within my 2 towns and a total of $5,000, which it wasn't easy to raise. Asking for money is never easy, but it wasn't as hard to raise as it would have been in the past. Plus, in addition, the benefits of the law were that no PAC money was allowed, no corporate contributions, no lobbyist money, no union money. There were huge restrictions, and rightfully so, on who could give money to our campaigns. Would you like to add to that, John? Tell us about what your thresholds were.
Well, the thresholds for the state senate race were $15,000 and 300 contributions from people who lived in the towns. I have 7 towns in the district, so I could get those contributions from any of those towns. I'd like to kind of roll back to why all of this started to begin with. You remember that Connecticut had a reputation, somewhat well-deserved, for corruption. Governor Rowland ended up in jail, and when Governor Rell came into office, she made it a priority on her part to pass campaign finance reform because she wanted to pull the special interest money out of the politics. And if you talk to people in Hartford today, they will tell you that there has been a real sea change in the way the state legislature is operating today. That the lobbyists who used to inundate the place are not there in nearly the same numbers. And that rather than coming in and giving a turnkey fundraising operation to someone that they liked and go out and raise money for them, they now have to actually, the lobbyists have to actually engage, intellectually engage, policy-wise engage with the members of the legislature. So there is a completely different tone. Now, it's going to take several years for the system to really work its way through and for all of the benefits to be seen. But I think we need to remember that the system was put in place because there was a big problem there, and the money was at the root of that problem. Now, I'd also like to say that when the law was passed, and I read the first time in 2005, and I actually helped on the grassroots level to get this law passed. and I was very much in favor of it then, and I'm in favor of it now. But as I read that law then, when I saw the minority party provisions, I said, this is unfair. There's no doubt about that. That is unfair. It should not have been written the way it was. I think that what happened at the time was that the state legislature was afraid that there would be all kinds of people qualifying, and that they would lose their seats. So we need to fix this law. There's no doubt that we need to fix this law. But if we do nothing over the next few months, the way the law works today, if there is an injunction still in place on April 15th, the law will be completely reverted back to where it was in 2005, which means that lobbyists will be able to give money, PACs will be able to give money, we'll have contractors giving money. We'll be right back to where we were before. So we need to find a middle way through.
Okay.
I agree very much we need to fix it, but we want to fix what's broken and we want to keep what's good.
Okay. Now, before we go on to talk more about state politics and state campaign financing, Rich, you ran for Congress against Jim Himes in the 4th Congressional District. Talk about campaign financing on a national level, and maybe we'll give the audience some insight into how good it is that we have some campaign financing laws, at least the aspects of it that, that we all agree on. Talk about national campaign financing.
Well, the campaign financing laws federally don't apply to the state offices, so it's a different system. But there are just incredible amounts of money. I mean, Jim Himes himself had more money from banks and more money from Goldman Sachs than any other candidate in either the House or the Senate. Only presidential and vice presidential candidates had more, and it's impossible to do anything with quantities, against quantities of money like that. Also, there is control of the press. For instance, it wasn't possible to get any coverage in any of the newspapers. It wasn't possible to get into the debates, as it was in 2006. League of Women Voters made a ruling that only Republicans and Democrats would be allowed into the debates. The private agencies that set up the debates won't let in anyone who doesn't look like they have a real shot at winning, in other words, a Democrat or a Republican. Right. The Supreme Court had ruled that it's all right for private agencies to run these debates, even though they're dealing with matters of most urgent public importance. And so things are completely stacked against third parties or anyone besides the Republicans and Democrats, and in many ways.
It sounds like you're of the mind that if we correct Connecticut's campaign finance law and get that level playing field and get the nuts and bolts fixed and the kinks worked out, that it would be something that probably would be good to see on a national level?
Well, I'd have to see the resulting law, but my guess is that if Connecticut could produce a law, say, at least as good or better than Arizona's or Maine's, then yeah, it may be a sort of thing which could be adapted at other levels or in other states and in the rest of the country on the federal level. But there are so many things at this point that guarantee the prominence of the two dominant parties that in many ways they're functioning like one party. I mean, this legislation itself is a combined effort to exclude any other political view, and that means that people can't even get into get issues into the legislature or in the public eye that clearly the majority of people favor. For instance, single-payer health care. Right? Majority of people want single-payer health care. The majority of physicians want single-payer health care. About 59% at the last count. And yet you can't even get the issue into the Congress because the Republicans and the Democrats have both decided not to promote it. And so the public is being shut out. That is, politics in this country is now plutocratic. It's become just a democratic facade. We have some democratic ideology, but the actual power is money. And what people can't get into debates, they can't get into the newspaper, they can't get public opportunities to talk to each other. For instance, there's no place where a Green Party candidate can collect signatures anymore. You can't get into a mall, for instance. In Massachusetts, there is a law that malls must be open for the collecting of signatures and for political campaigning. We don't have such a law. If 90% of the supermarkets that could allow us to stand in front of the supermarket and collect signatures and such would not allow it in 2008, and the few that did allow it in 2008 have now stopped it. And so we're just being shut out of the system completely. Finance reform law is only one aspect of that. They're trying to make it look like there are no political opinions other than the Republicans and Democrats.
Let's go back and talk a little bit about the Maine law and the Arizona law, because when Connecticut passed its law, there was a claim that Connecticut's law was far superior to the Maine and Arizona law. Mm-hmm. And on our last program, you mentioned, Mike, that in fact the Maine and the Arizona law you felt were far superior. Re-explain that to our audience.
Okay, well, first of all, in our opinion, this is not campaign finance reform. This is campaign finance deform. It's no Republican or Democrat left behind law. I'm convinced at this point that what this is about is they took, as I mentioned earlier, the Maine law, put it on steroids, allowed...
In what way?
Well, in that it's a lot easier for these candidates to, like, for example, I ran against John Fanfare. John usually raises around $30,000. Yep. This year, he only had to raise $15,000. And he got $85,000, plus he got $75,000 for the primary. That's another aspect that's egregious that has to be addressed by this legislature.
Can the Green Party or can a minority party not have what's the word I'm looking for?
Government sponsored?
No, the primary.
The primary, unless we have a government, we're not allowed to have government sponsored primaries under the dubious, principle that nobody in the Green Party would disagree with another Green Party member to run for a specific office. This is spurious on it, on its surface. But the fact is that the law is written so if someone buys signs with the $75,000 for the primary, they're going to be using those signs in the election, and many of the things that they are able to get. So it turns out that instead of getting $30,000, he now gets $160,000 plus through organizational expenditures. He got another $6,000. I mean, the judge indicated that these are called windfall levels of funding that are impermissible subsidies for major party candidates rather than permissible substitute for those traditional sources of funding. He also recognizes that simultaneously the law is cleverly crafted to add additional qualifying criteria for minor party candidates that are so difficult to achieve that the vast majority of minor party candidates will never become eligible to receive public funding at even reduced levels. And there is a reduced level formula in there. But the bottom line is, as we mentioned last time, in order to get what we need for governor, we would have to get 20% of the vote. So we're talking 224,663, give or take one or two signatures, in order to get the full grant, which is $3.2 million, or, as I mentioned before, 400,000 signatures overall. The point is, these are outrageous numbers.
To whittle down to that 226,000 when they're reviewed.
Right. Now, these are outrageous numbers. Furthermore,
now how many can't you made a mention of a level of signatures that a Democratic Party or a Republican Party candidate would have to get?
Zero.
Which was zero.
They had zero. Now, in Maine, if you want to run for governor, you collect 3,250 donations of $5 each. End of story. You end up with $1 million, which I think is more than adequate. The numbers...
you haven't run a statewide race lately, have you?
Well, I think that, quite frankly, the money is going to the media. And that's the problem. The problem is that in order for us to get our name recognition out there, even if we ran somebody who was known, we would have to spend outrageous amounts of money money.
That's because your party doesn't have anybody who's supporting it. How many Green Party members are there in the state of Connecticut? You talk about, you know, the plurocracy here of the Democrats and Republicans. That's absolutely true, because for 150 years, 200 years, they've been the major parties in this country. They've got thousands of supporters. They've got people who work very hard. We have campaigns. We have offices. We have people that we pay. Of course, you know.
Well, can I ask you something, John? Let me ask you something. The Republican Party right now has 20.3% of the registered voters in the state of Connecticut. If they lose 0.3% and don't run Jody well, and someone gets under 20%, what happens to the Republican Party? Do they become a minor party under this law?
They just became the minor party in Bridgeport on
They
Tuesday.
have been the minor party in Bridgeport, New Haven, Hartford for 30 years.
And let me finish, because they became a minor party because the Working Families Party went out and they won seats in the Board of Education, and they have now relegated the Republicans to the third place. So here's a very clear example of a third-party operation which does have some funding, which does have some support, which has got people across the state that are working for it, and they're actually being successful. And they've been successful in Bridgeport, and they've been successful in Hartford. And you guys haven't.
Okay, let me ask you a question, John. How many Working Families Party
let me just step in for real quick.
Yeah.
Before you go on, I want to take a step backwards. Point well taken in what you're saying. But historically in America, there have not been a Democratic and Republican Party. We've had parties that evolved and came up. The Republican Party is only since, what, 1850 or so.
Right, it replaced the party that went away. But 1850 was how long ago?
Yep, and we had, one time had the Whig Party, and they, like the Republicans are threatening to do, they disappeared.
Well, the Republicans seem to have come back pretty strongly on Tuesday. The point here is that we have basically a two-party system in this country. We have also historically had the rise of third parties, which have taken on very clear roles of bringing up issues that the other two parties didn't want to talk about, injecting that into the election system, but generally they have faded. We had progressive party, we had a socialist party, we had conservatives in New York. Remember back in the 70s, there was a conservative party in New York, and they actually elected a senator. So it's not impossible for third parties to rise. And there's a very clear case in Connecticut today. There were in fact two working parties family state Senate or House candidates, state House candidates, who qualified for the funding in the last cycle. They got the funding.
You're talking through petitioning?
They got the funding. They qualified. They qualified
you know,
for the funding.
You're missing the point. Cicero Brooker ran at first as an independent party, and then decided to hire the Working Families Party to their subsidiary that goes around collecting signatures to put him on the ballot. Wait a minute, just a second.
Let me stop you from doing the same thing.
Let me finish my sentence. The point is that you're saying there were two people that did it. I'm telling you that there were specific indications where that isn't true. It's not true.
They qualified.
No.
That is,
was Cicero Brooker a Working Families Party?
They got the money.
Was he a Working Families Party person?
If you look in your lawsuit, it'll say right there in the lawsuit, it references the fact that there were two Working Families Party people who qualified. They got the money. So it is possible to do it.
Okay,
and you need organization, and you need people on the ground, and you guys don't have it, and that's a big problem.
Well, in 2008, 103 people ran as a minor party candidate. I checked them. I went to the website and counted every single one of them. 12 were write-ins, but the rest were third-party candidates. Out of that, 5 people qualified for funding in 2008. So you're talking about less than 5% of the people. And what the judge says is it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely.
I understand that.
We are being damaged as a political party.
So
you can't walk away from that.
So let's fix that piece. Excuse me. Let's fix that piece. I said from the very beginning that I agreed that the impediments that they put in front of you are wrong. But I also would be willing to say that if they changed that and said to you, okay, go out and raise $15,000 and get 300 signatures and run for state senate, that you would have a difficult time doing it. You might be able to do it, but it's not as easy as you think. Because I've been there, I've done it, and I know what it takes.
Well, the judge said that there's windfall levels being put into this system.
That's his opinion.
Well,
windfall levels, look.
Well, look at the statistics from the last 3 elections.
More than they had before when they got.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I want to add several things. First off. You're making it look like this is simply a two-party country, but that's not an accident. That's because the Democrats and Republicans have agreed to exclude third parties.
That's right.
In the 1892 and 1896 elections, in order to prevent the populists from winning the presidency, the agreement between the Democrats and Republicans was that the Republicans would not complain about Jim Crow and segregation and sharecropping in the South if the Democrats did not complain about the dominance of the Republicans in factories in the North.
Let's come to today.
That's the first point.
It's not a two-party state. Excuse me. It's not a two-party state today.
Well,
if you look
this law makes Connecticut a two-party state.
And we can fix that. But if you look at the registration, you will see that there are more, in fact, unaffiliated voters than there are Republicans in this district.
42%. No. The point is, you're taking money.
For you to win, and you haven't done it.
Wait a second. You're taking the money from those people, and you're using it purely for the benefits of the Republicans and Democrats, who were less than 58% of the population.
Let's change
That's 42% of the people are not getting the benefit of that.
Let's change the law.
Okay.
Let's
Yes,
make
let's
an even
change
playing
the law.
field. That's all we say. Let's make an even playing field. That's fine.
No,
and then if you can get the
why
money,
we haven't done it, and why the Working Families Party has. The Working Families Party is funded by the Democratic Party.
No, it's not.
Yes, Jim Himes offered me $4,000 to get out of the race in 2008, and he said that what he would do was exactly the same thing he'd done with the Working Families Party, which was to get himself on the ballot to fund people to go out and get the signatures. In other words, he wanted us to be a front for the Democratic Party.
Well,
that's the kind of reason that this state just has Republicans and Democrats.
The other aspect is during the last election, there were 62 Working Families Party people who cross-endorsed Democrats.
Yes.
And they believe, and I'll take them at their word, that this is the American form of proportional representation.
Yep.
You know, that's their intellectual excuse for doing it this way. I don't believe that, but you know, if that's the way they feel, fine. The bottom line is you can't run away from the fact that we, in most states, most cities in Connecticut, there are new two parties. There are Democrats, 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 and Democrats. And here we are working in the cities trying to get on board, and instead of allowing us the opportunity to participate in this, what this system does is give our Democratic opponents huge amounts of money, which is exactly what the judge said in the case. People are saying this is a radical judge.
Okay, I have to step in. I have to step in. We've got 30 seconds left. Quick thoughts on what specifically should be changed about the law. We've got 30 seconds.
Well, I would say the first thing you got to do is get rid of the petitioning. You have to reduce the amounts of money that are being spent on these campaigns. You got to open up the media. You have to allow people to walk into various grocery stores to hand out literature. And lastly, and most importantly, I think you just got to treat us fairly.
We ran a little long. I'm going to have to cut it off there. We'll be back another day to talk about this marvelous discussion. I'm David Stevenson. We've had some wonderful guests on tonight and some very spirited discussion. This is Progressive Sue.
Thank you.
Good evening.